They say a mother's love is an endless ocean, but what happens when that ocean hits a wall of stone-cold betrayal? This is the story of a 6-year-old mother who believed that giving her son everything was simply what mothers do, until the day her lifetime of kindness was repaid with cold contempt, and the declaration that she was now worthless. But the deepest cut wasn't the insult itself. It was the crushing silence of her only son as he stood by and did nothing. That betrayal didn't break her. Instead, it forged her boundless love into an unbreakable, iron-willed resolve. Can pain become the most powerful weapon, allowing an elderly woman to fight back and reclaim everything she has lost? The gavels echo, and a heart silence. My name is Vivian Reed. I am 76 years old, and on that day, inside the cold, airless rooms of the Fulton County Courthouse, I got everything back. The judge, a woman with tired eyes and hair pulled back so tight it looked like it hurt, didn't even look at me when she read the verdict. Her voice was flat, like the gray carpet on the floor. She spoke a lot of legal words, words like unjust enrichment and breach of contract. And then came the final sound, the sound of her wooden gavel hitting the block. Crack. It was a sound so sharp, so final, it cut through the thick silence of the courtroom. The lawyer beside me, a kind young man named Mr. Davies, touched my arm gently. His hand was warm. He whispered, "It's over, Mrs. Reed. You won." I won. That's what he said. I had gotten it all back. The house on the hill in Decatur, the money, all $300,000 of it, my life savings, I had won. But sitting there, on that hard wooden bench, I felt no joy. There was no sweet taste of victory on my tongue, only the bitter ash of what the winning had cost. Because before I tell you about the legal papers, the depositions, and the long, sleepless nights, I have to tell you about the silence. My grandmother, who grew up picking cotton in South Georgia, used to say that the quietest person in the room is the one who hears the truth first. For 5 years, I was quiet, and oh, the truths I heard. But the worst silence, the silence that finally broke me, it wasn't my own. It was the silence of my son, my Marcus. It was his silence on a Tuesday afternoon in May, just after his wife, Jasmine, looked me straight in the eye and spoke the words that started this war. It all began with such a simple request, a reasonable one. I thought, I had asked for a piece of paper, a legal document, just to make things clear about the money. My money. The money I had handed over with a praying heart. The money I scraped together over 40 years of shelving books at the local school library. The money that bought them their beautiful house with a garden big enough for the grandchildren I hoped to one day hold. Jasmine had been smiling at first. That perfect, polished smile she wore like expensive jewelry. But as I spoke, the smile thinned. It became a sharp, straight line. Her eyes, usually so bright and warm, turned to chips of dark glass. A legal document. "Vivian," she asked. The way she said my name, it wasn't the warm Mama Reed she'd used for years. It was the name a stranger would use. Flat. Cold. I tried to explain, gently. I've always believed you can catch more flies with honey than with vinegar. It's just for security, dear. For all of us. You never know what the future holds. She laughed. A short, sharp sound, like a shard of glass breaking on the tile floor. "Oh, I think I know exactly what the future holds," she said. Her voice dripped with something I couldn't name then, but now know was contempt. She stood up, smoothing down the front of her perfect silk dress. She walked over to the large picture window that overlooked the manicured lawn I had helped pay for, and then she said it. "Honestly, your opinion doesn't matter," she said, her back still to me. "You're old. You don't understand the modern world." She turned then, her face a mask of cold fury. "Without that money," she paused, letting the words hang in the air between us. "You're worthless to us." Worthless. The word hung in the quiet, sunlit room. It was heavy. It was ugly. It landed between us and shattered the afternoon. My head snapped towards my son, my Marcus. He was sitting on the expensive leather sofa, the one I had helped them choose. He was my boy, the one I had raised alone after his father passed on. the one whose scraped knees I had kissed, whose every report card I had framed. I raised him to be a good man, a strong man, a man who stood up for what was right. I looked at him, my heart screaming his name. Marcus, say something. Please. Defend me. He didn't. He just sat there. He looked down at his own hands, resting on his knees, his very capable architect's hands, the hands that could design magnificent buildings, but could not, in that moment, even raise one finger to defend his own mother. He just stared at them, as if they belonged to someone else. That was the moment the war truly began. Not when she spoke the ugly word, but when he answered with his deafening silence. Her cruelty was the wound. His silence was the salt poured into it. I stood up. My legs felt unsteady, like a newborn foal's. I didn't say goodbye. There were no more words left to say. I walked out of that beautiful house, past the rose bushes I had helped them plant, and got into my 10-year-old car. I drove home in a daze, the word echoing in my head with every turn of the wheels. Worthless. That night, I did not cry. I simply sat in my husband's old armchair, the worn fabric a small comfort against my back, and in the quiet darkness of my small, paid-for home, I made a decision. She thought I was worthless. She thought I was a relic from a bygone era, easily discarded. She was about to find out just how much a worthless old woman was willing to fight for her own name, and for the truth. This is that story, the whole story, starting from the very beginning, back when the smiles were real, and the future felt full of promise. Sweet honey and a priceless gift. It's funny how memory works. Looking back now, it's like watching a movie where you already know the ending. You see all the little signs, the clues you missed the first time around. But back then, all I saw was my son's happiness. And for a mother, that's a light so bright it can blind you to almost anything else. The day Marcus brought Jasmine home for Sunday dinner, I remember feeling a flutter of nerves. He was my only child, my whole world. And I just wanted him to find a good woman. And then she walked in. Jasmine Sutton was, well, she was like something out of a magazine. Tall, elegant, with a smile that could charm the bees right out of a hive. She was wearing a simple white dress, but on her, it looked like $1 million. She walked right over to me, took both my hands in hers, and said, "It is such an honor to finally meet you. Mama Reed." Mama Reed. The name felt warm, like slipping my hands into a pair of soft gloves on a cold day. That evening, she sat at my small dining table and praised my gumbo like it was a dish served in a 5-star restaurant. She asked about my late husband, Richard. She looked at his picture on the mantelpiece and said Marcus had his kind eyes. She listened, really listened, as I told her stories about Marcus as a little boy. She made me feel seen, important. For the next 2 years, she was the perfect daughter-in-law. She never forgot my birthday. She called me every week, just to check in. When Marcus got a big promotion at his architecture firm, she insisted they come over and celebrate with me first. Bringing a bottle of champagne, she'd sit in my kitchen, watching me cook, asking for my recipes. She was weaving herself into the fabric of our lives, thread by careful thread, and I welcomed her with an open heart. I saw in her the daughter I never had, the future of our family. Then came the house. They had been living in a small apartment downtown, and they were ready for more space. A yard. A place to put down roots. They found a beautiful brick house in Decatur, with old oak trees in the front yard and a sunroom in the back. It was perfect. It was also perfectly out of their price range. They had enough for the monthly payments, they said, but the down payment was a mountain they couldn't climb. One evening, they sat on my sofa, the same one my Richard and I had bought 40 years ago. Marcus held a brochure for the house, his finger tracing the lines of the floor plan. Jasmine sat beside him, her face full of a quiet, hopeful sadness. "We'll just have to keep saving, I guess," Marcus said, his voice heavy with disappointment. "Maybe in a few years." Jasmine put her hand on his arm. "It's okay, honey. It just wasn't meant to be." She looked over at me and gave a little, brave smile, but I saw the longing in her eyes. And in that moment, I saw a chance to give my son not just a house, but a foundation for his entire future. I saw a chance to give him the security his father and I had worked so hard to build for ourselves. I didn't even have to think about it. It wasn't a decision. Really. It was an instinct. The same instinct that made me run to him when he fell off his bike. The same instinct that kept me up all night when he had a fever. It was a mother's instinct. I can help, I said. The next morning, I went to the bank. The same bank I'd been going to since I got my first paycheck from the school library. I sat down with the manager, a nice man named Mr. Henderson. He pulled up my account on his computer screen. There it was, $300,212.47. It wasn't just a number to me. It was 40 years of getting up before the sun rose. It was packing my own lunch every single day. It was mending my clothes instead of buying new ones. It was every vacation I didn't take. Every little luxury I told myself I didn't need. It was Richard's life insurance money that I never touched, keeping it safe for a rainy day. This wasn't just my savings. This was my life's work in a single line on a screen. I want to withdraw $300,000. I told Mr. Henderson. He looked at me over his glasses. That's a very large sum. Vivian, are you sure? Is everything all right? I just smiled. Everything is more than all right. Robert, it's for my son. I signed the cashier's check with a steady hand. It felt sacred, like I was passing on a torch. I wasn't losing a fortune. I was investing it in the one thing that mattered more to me than anything in the world. When I gave them the check that evening, Jasmine cried. Real tears, I thought. She hugged me so tight I could barely breathe. Oh, Mama Reed. She sobbed into my shoulder. We will pay back every single penny. I promise. Marcus just held the check in his hands, staring at it. He looked up at me, his eyes shining. Mom was all he could say. But in that one word, I heard everything I needed to hear. Gratitude. Love. The unbreakable bond between a mother and her son. Looking back, there was just one small thing. A tiny crack in the perfect picture. A few weeks earlier, before the house, Jasmine and I were looking through one of my old photo albums. We came across a picture of me in the 70s, with a big afro and bell-bottom jeans. She'd laughed and said, "Oh, Vivian, your taste was so folksy back then." Folksy. I remember the word felt a little strange, like a shoe that was just a bit too tight, but she was smiling when she said it. So I just smiled back. It was nothing, just a silly word. It's amazing, isn't it, how the smallest cracks, over time, can bring the whole house down. But on that day, with that check in my son's hand and his wife's tears on my shoulder, I felt like I was the strongest, richest woman in the world. I had given them a home. I had secured their future. I had done what any loving mother would do, and I had never, ever felt more worthless. Cracks in the porcelain. After they moved into the house on the hill, things began to change. It wasn't a sudden shift. It was a slow cooling, a gradual turning away, like the sun inching across the sky. You don't notice it moving until you realize you're sitting in the shade. The first time I felt the chill was a few months in. I had come over for our usual Sunday dinner. As I walked into the living room, I noticed something was different. The small, silver-framed photos on the mantelpiece were gone. The one of Marcus in his high school graduation gown, the one of my late husband, Samuel, holding Marcus as a baby, the one of the three of us on a fishing trip at Lake Lanier. They had been replaced by a single, large, professionally shot portrait of Jasmine and Marcus. They looked beautiful, perfect, and completely alone. I asked about the old photos. Jasmine gave me that bright, dismissive smile of hers. "Oh, Mama Reed," she said, her voice light as air. "We were just updating the decor, giving the room a more cohesive look." Cohesive, that was the word she used. My family's history, my husband's memory, had been stored away in a box somewhere in the name of a cohesive look. Marcus was standing right there, by the fireplace. He heard her. He just picked up a magazine from the coffee table and started flipping through the pages. Then came the little comments, the small, sharp digs disguised as helpful advice. At Thanksgiving that year, She looked at the sweet potato pie I had made from my own mother's recipe. "How sweet," she said, loud enough for her friends to hear. "So rustic." On my birthday the following spring, she gave me a gift certificate for a fancy spa. "We have to do something about those worry lines, Vivian," she'd said with a wink, patting my hand. She had stopped calling me Mama Reed by then. The phone calls from Marcus became less frequent. They used to be a daily check-in. A quick, "Hey, Mom, how you doing?" Now, a week could go by, then two. When I called him, the conversations were short, strained. I could always hear Jasmine's voice in the background. "Honey, is that your mother? Tell her we have to run." Run. They were always running somewhere. To a dinner party, to an art gallery opening, to a life where I was becoming less and less a part of the picture. I started to feel like a visitor in my own son's life. A guest who had overstayed her welcome. When I would come over, Jasmine would speak to me with a kind of exaggerated patience. The kind of voice you use for a small child or a very old person who can't quite keep up. She would explain simple things to me. How their new coffee machine worked. What a podcast was. As if 40 years as a librarian had taught me nothing about the world. And through it all, Marcus was a ghost in his own home. He was there. But he wasn't. He would sit with us. But his eyes would be on his phone. He would listen to her polite condescension. His jaw tight. A muscle twitching in his cheek, but he never said a word. Not once. He just let her words hang in the air. Unanswered, he let her build a wall between us. Brick by polite brick, and he did nothing to stop it. The worst part of it all was the doubt. It creeps in during the quiet hours of the night. You start to ask yourself questions. Am I being too sensitive? Am I imagining this? Is this just how things are now? Maybe she's right. Maybe I am just an old woman who doesn't understand. Isolation is a slow poison. It makes you question your own mind. It makes you feel invisible. Even when you're sitting in a room full of people, it makes you feel like you are a problem that needs to be managed. I wonder, for those of you listening to my voice right now, have you ever been made to feel that way? Like a ghost in your own family? Please, if you have, share your story in the comments below. Let us know that we are not alone in this feeling. Your presence here is the greatest encouragement for me to keep telling the rest of this journey. The word and the silence. For weeks, a feeling of unease had settled in my bones. It was a dull ache, the kind that signals a coming storm. The whispers of Jasmine, the distance from Marcus, it all began to feel less like my imagination and more like a carefully built wall. A wall with my money in the foundation, and I was on the outside of it. So, one Tuesday, I woke up and decided enough was enough. I am not a confrontational woman by nature. I have always believed that a soft word turns away wrath, but I also believe in doing what is right and securing my future. The one I had worked my whole life to build was right. I rehearsed my speech in the car on the way to their house. I would be calm. I would be loving. I would explain that a simple legal document, a promissory note, wasn't about a lack of trust. It was about good sense. It was about protecting everyone. I felt a knot of anxiety in my stomach, but I pushed it down. I was his mother. She was my daughter-in-law. We were family. We could talk about anything. When I arrived, Jasmine was arranging flowers in a tall crystal vase. She seemed surprised to see me, but she smiled that perfect smile. "Mama Reed, what a nice surprise." Marcus came in from his home office, looking tired. He gave me a quick, distracted hug. I sat on the edge of the sofa, my purse clutched in my lap. I took a deep breath and began, using the exact words I had practiced. I spoke about the future, about being responsible. I spoke about wanting to make sure everything was in order, for their sake as much as mine. As I talked, I watched Jasmine. The smile on her face didn't disappear. It froze. It became a brittle, glassy thing. She stopped touching the flowers and crossed her arms over her chest. When I finished, there was a heavy silence. "A legal document, Vivian?" she finally asked. And just like that, Mama Reed was gone, vanished. I explained again, my voice still calm, though I could feel my heart starting to beat a little faster. "It's just a formality, dear. It's what my Richard would have wanted. He was always so careful with these things." She laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. It was short, sharp, like a shard of glass breaking. "Oh, I'm sure Richard would have wanted a lot of things," she said. The disrespect in her tone was so clear, so sharp. It was like a slap. "Jasmine," Marcus said, his voice quiet, a warning, but she ignored him. She turned her full attention to me, her eyes narrowing. "Let me get this straight. After all this time, after we've built a life here, you're coming into our home and demanding we sign papers, as if we're tenants, as if we owe you something." "You do owe me," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "You promised." That's when it happened. The mask didn't just slip. She ripped it off. I promised to be grateful. And I was, but gratitude has a shelf life. "Vivian," she spat, "this is our home now, not yours. You don't get a say in it anymore." She took a step closer, and for the first time, I saw the raw, naked ambition in her eyes. It was chilling. She walked over to the large picture window that overlooked the manicured lawn, the lawn I had helped pay for, and then she said it. "Honestly, your opinion doesn't matter," she said, her back to me. "You're old. You don't understand the modern world." She turned then, her face a mask of cold fury. "Without that money," she paused, letting the words hang in the air between us. "You're worthless to us." Worthless. The word, it didn't just hang in the air. It exploded. It sent shockwaves through the room, shattering the afternoon sunlight, shattering everything I thought I knew. My breath caught in my throat. My ears were ringing, but through the ringing, I looked at my son, my Marcus. He was sitting on that expensive leather sofa. He wasn't looking at her. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking down at the floor, at the pattern on the Persian rug. His hands were clenched into tight fists on his knees. I could see the whites of his knuckles. He was a statue of a man, carved from inaction. My heart, my very soul, screamed out to him, "Say something. Anything. Look at me. Tell her she's wrong. Tell her I'm your mother. Tell her I have value." He didn't move. He didn't speak. He didn't even breathe. It seemed the silence that followed her word was a terrible thing. But his silence was the end of the world. Her cruelty was a knife. His silence was the hand that twisted it. I don't remember standing up. I don't remember walking to the door. The next thing I knew, I was in my car. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely fit the key into the ignition. I drove home. The trees along the road were a green blur. The other cars were ghosts. The only thing that was real was that word, and the silence that followed it. Worthless. Followed by nothing. That was the moment I broke. Not into tears. Not into screams. I broke into a million silent pieces. It was a clean break. A quiet one. The kind of break you can't ever truly mend. The kind that changes you. Forever. The fateful call and the quiet moves. For 24 hours after that day, I did nothing. I sat in my husband's armchair, the one with the worn velvet arms where his hands used to rest. And I just existed. The sun came up, casting long shadows across the living room floor, and the sun went down, taking all the light with it. The house was silent, except for the low, steady hum of the refrigerator. It's a sound you never notice until it's the only sound left. Grief is a heavy blanket. It's thick. It's suffocating. And it smothers every other feeling. I didn't eat. The phone rang twice, but I didn't answer. I just sat, letting the emptiness of the house seep into my bones. I wasn't just mourning the loss of a relationship. I was mourning the loss of the son I thought I knew, the boy I had built my whole world around. But on the second morning, I woke up in that same chair, a crick in my neck and a chill deep in my soul. And something had shifted inside me. The heavy blanket of sorrow was still there, draped over my shoulders. But underneath it, something else had sparked. It was a cold, pard ember, a tiny point of light in the darkness. It was the part of me that had survived widowhood at 45, the part that had raised a boy on a single librarian's salary, that had faced down leaky roofs and medical bills and the lonely silence of this very house, and had refused to blink. I did not cry. I finally understood that the time for tears was over. Tears were a luxury I could no longer afford. I pushed myself up from the chair, my joints protesting. I walked with a steady purpose to the old wooden desk in the spare bedroom. the one that had been Samuel's. I opened the bottom drawer. It squeaked. A long, complaining sound in the quiet house. Underneath a neat stack of old tax returns and appliance warranties was a small, black address book with a worn leather cover. My late husband had been a meticulous man. He believed in order. He believed in having a plan. In it, written in his familiar, steady script, I found the number for the law firm he had used to write our wills. All those years ago. Davies, Williams, and Finch. My hand was perfectly steady as I picked up the phone and dialed the number. My voice, when I spoke to the young woman who answered, was calm. It sounded like someone else's voice. A stranger's. I asked to speak with an attorney regarding a contract dispute. A few days later, I found myself sitting in a high-backed leather chair that smelled of polish and old books. The office was on the top floor of a downtown skyscraper, and from the window, I could see the whole of Atlanta spread out below. It all looked so small from up there. Across from me sat Mr. Davies, the son of the man who had been my husband's lawyer. He had the same kind eyes as his father, but a more serious set to his jaw. I told him everything. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't allow a single tear to fall. I laid out the facts, one by one, like a librarian cataloging the chapters of a very sad book. The date I withdrew the funds, the conversation in the kitchen of my old house, the promise Marcus had made, the years of small humiliations that followed, and, finally, the word, worthless. He listened patiently, his pen scratching quietly against a yellow legal pad. He never interrupted. When I was finished, a heavy silence filled the room. He put down his pen and looked at me, his gaze direct and compassionate. "Mrs. Reed," he said, his voice gentle but firm, "I'm not going to lie to you. This will be difficult. Suing your own son, it will be painful. It will force you to put your family's private business on public display, and there are no guarantees. A verbal contract is a hard thing to prove in court." I looked past him, out the window, at the endless stream of cars moving silently on the highway below. So many people, all going somewhere. I felt completely still. "Mr. Davies," I said, my voice as calm and steady as the glass in the window pane. "When my husband died, he left me with two things of value: our son and our good name. For years, I believed that was enough. This is no longer about the money. The money is just paper. This is about my name, my husband's name. It's the only thing I have left that is truly mine, and I will not have it be synonymous with that word." He held my gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. He understood, and so, the quiet moves began. Mr. Davies explained the process. He told me what I needed to do. Step 1. I went home and pulled out the large accordion file where I kept all my important papers. I went through my old bank statements until I found the carbon copy of the cashier's check for $300,000. Dated nearly 6 years ago. I made a clean, crisp photocopy. Step 2. I went to the store and bought a fresh notebook, the kind with the blue lines and the spiral binding. I began to write down everything I could remember. Every conversation, every broken promise, every little slight that had felt like a paper cut at the time, but had now bled into a mortal wound. The librarian in me took over. I created a timeline. I cross-referenced dates with my old calendars and photo albums. My little house on the quiet street became the headquarters for a war no one else knew was coming. It was during this time, in the weeks that followed, that the strangest things started to happen with Marcus. After what felt like an eternity of silence, he called. It was a Tuesday evening. The connection was bad, full of static. His voice was faint, distant. "Mom," he said, I just wanted to..." His voice trailed off, and then the line went dead. He didn't call back. A few days later, a text message appeared on my old flip phone. Just 3 words. "Are you okay?" I stared at the tiny screen for a long time. "Are you okay?" The question felt like a cruel joke. I deleted it without replying. What was there to say that wouldn't sound like an accusation? At the time, I filed these incidents away as guilt, the weak, useless guilt of a man who knew he had done wrong but didn't have the courage to face it. I saw it as a pathetic attempt to soothe his own conscience, to check a box that said he had tried. I believed he was simply weak, It would be a long, long time. Not until I saw the look on his face as he sat in the witness box, with the weight of the whole world on his shoulders, before I would understand the true meaning of those strange, broken signals. He was sending a message, a disparate, coded message. But my heart was too wounded, too armored over, to even know how to begin to read it. The war in the shadows. Filing a lawsuit is not like what you see in the movies. There is no sudden drama, no grand moment. It is a slow, grinding process. A war fought not on a battlefield, but in stacks of paper and quiet, sterile rooms. It's a war of attrition, and its first casualty is your peace of mind. Jasmine, I soon learned, was a masterful soldier in this kind of war. Her weapon wasn't a cannon, it was the telephone. With her background in public relations, she knew exactly how to shape a story, and the story she began to tell was a cruel one. It started subtly. My cousin Martha called one afternoon. Her voice was full of a strange, hesitant pity. "Vivian, honey," she said. "Are you sure you know what you're doing? Jasmine is just heartbroken. She says she just wishes you could accept her place in Marcus's life." Accept her place. As if I were a rival, not a mother. Then my old friend from the library, Doris, stopped calling me for our weekly coffee. When I finally reached her, she was distant. "I just don't want to get in the middle of a family dispute," she said, but I could hear the unspoken words hanging in the air. "The family dispute that you started." Jasmine was painting a portrait of me, stroke by careful stroke. In her version, I was a lonely, bitter old woman, a controlling mother who couldn't let her son go. The $300,000 wasn't a gift from a loving heart, it was a leash, a tool of manipulation. And this lawsuit, it was my final, desperate attempt to pull him back. It was a lie, a poisonous one, but it was a simple story. And simple stories are often the easiest to believe. The days grew long and heavy. My world, once filled with friends and family, became quiet. So quiet. The silence I had chosen in my own home was one thing. This silence, the one imposed on me by the whispers of others, was a prison. Then came the deposition. It's a legal term for a meeting, but it felt like an interrogation. I had to sit in a conference room with a long, polished table that reflected my tired face back at me. On one side was my lawyer, Mr. Davies. On the other side was Jasmine's lawyer, a sharp-faced man who smiled with his teeth but not his eyes. Jasmine was there too, looking serene and sad, a victim in a designer suit. For 3 hours, her lawyer questioned me. He twisted every memory, every act of kindness. "Mrs. Reed, isn't it true you called your son every single day when he first went to college?" "Yes," I said. "I was his mother. I missed him. Or were you checking up on him?" "Mrs. Reed, making sure he wasn't becoming too independent. He took the birthday checks I sent, the extra money for textbook, the home-cooked meals I'd drop off at their apartment, and he turned them all into evidence of my overbearing nature. He made my love sound like a sickness." I sat there, under the hum of the fluorescent lights, and felt my life being rewritten into a story I didn't recognize. A story where I was the villain, but the worst part of that whole ordeal was Marcus. He had to give a deposition too, separately. Mr. Davies warned me not to expect much. "He's in a difficult position. Vivian," he'd said. I didn't understand what difficult meant until Mr. Davies showed me the transcript of what my son had said. I read it in my kitchen that night, the pages trembling in my hands. Jasmine's lawyer had asked him about me, about our relationship. "Would you describe your mother as traditional, Mr. Pierce?" the lawyer had asked, and Marcus had answered, "Yes. My mother has very traditional views on family, and would it be fair to say that she sometimes involves herself deeply in your life, perhaps a bit too deeply?" There was a pause recorded in the transcript, a long one. I could picture him in that room, looking down at his hands, just like he did that day in the living room. Then, his answer. "My mom and I are close," he said. His voice, even on paper, sounded weak, distant. "Sometimes, she might have a hard time letting go. A hard time letting go." I put the papers down on the table. The words felt like stones in my stomach. It wasn't an outright lie, but it wasn't the truth either. It was a betrayal wrapped in careful, neutral words. He hadn't defended me. He hadn't stood up for the truth. He had taken the easy way out. He had offered the lawyer just enough to feed their ugly story. That night, the quiet in my house was different. It was no longer a chosen solitude. It was the profound, echoing silence of being utterly and completely alone. I was no longer just fighting for my money, or even my name. I was fighting against the ghost of the son I thought I had raised, and a cold, hard anger began to smolder in my heart. It was a slow-burning fire, the kind that gives you the strength to walk through hell without flinching. On the witness stand. The day I had to testify felt unreal. The courtroom was just like the ones on television, only dustier and colder. The air was thick with a heavy, formal silence. I could hear the hum of the overhead lights. I could see the faces of the jury, a line of strangers, their expressions blank and unreadable. My lawyer, Mr. Davies, gave my shoulder a reassuring squeeze before I walked up to the stand. "Just tell the truth, Vivian," he whispered. "That's all you have to do. The truth." It sounded so simple. I sat in the witness chair. It felt high up, exposed, like being on a tiny island with everyone watching. I swore an oath on a Bible that had been touched by 1,000 other hands, 1,000 other stories. Then, Jasmine's lawyer stood up. He walked towards me, his shoes making soft, predatory sounds on the floor. He smiled, that same cold smile from the deposition. For the next hour, he took my life apart, piece by piece. He had copies of everything. Emails I had sent to Marcus in college, birthday cards, bank statements showing the little checks I'd sent him for gas money or a new pair of shoes. In his hands, these things were no longer tokens of a mother's love. They were weapons. "Mrs. Reed," he began, his voice smooth as silk. "In this email from October 2005, you tell your son you are sending a little something to help with his rent. Is that correct?" "Yes," I said. "He was a student. He was struggling. Or were you, perhaps, ensuring his dependence on you?" Mrs. Reed, making sure he knew who was paying the bills. He held up a birthday card I had written. "And here, you wrote, 'Always remember your mother loves you more than anyone.' A bit possessive, wouldn't you say? Almost a warning to any future partners?" Every question was a hook. Every memory was a trap. He painted a picture of a woman desperate for control, using money as her tool. I tried to defend myself. I tried to explain the context, the love behind the actions. But my words sounded weak, flustered. He twisted everything. My concern was control. My generosity was manipulation. My love was possession. I felt myself shrinking in that chair. I was no longer Vivian Reed. Retired school librarian. Mother. Widow. I was a character in his ugly story. A caricature of a jealous mother-in-law. I looked out at the people in the room. I saw Jasmine, dabbing at her eyes with a delicate handkerchief, playing the part of the wounded wife perfectly. And I looked at Marcus. He was sitting at the table beside her. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at a legal pad on the table, doodling little squares, over and over. A man building walls of ink on a page. Then came the final question, the one designed to break me completely. The lawyer leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper for the whole room to hear. "Mrs. Reed, let's be honest. Shall we? Isn't the real reason we're all here today, the real reason you're putting your son and his wife through this public humiliation, isn't it simply because you cannot accept that your son loves another woman more than he loves you?" The air left my body. The question was so cruel, so obscene. It hung there in the cold, silent courtroom. He wasn't just questioning my motives. He was questioning the very core of my motherhood. He was taking the purest thing I had ever known and making it ugly. I opened my mouth to answer, to scream, to tell him how wrong he was. But no sound came out. My throat was tight with a grief so profound. It had no words. My eyes found my son's. Just for a second, this time, he looked up, and in his eyes, I saw nothing. Just a deep, hollow emptiness. He looked away, back down to his little squares, and in that moment, I knew I had lost him. Maybe not the case, but I had lost him. Whatever was left of the boy I had raised was gone, buried under a mountain of silence and carefully drawn squares. The judge prompted me, "Mrs. Reed, do you have an answer?" I shook my head. I couldn't speak. I don't. I finally managed to whisper, "Mr." Davies stood up. "I have no further questions for this witness." "Your Honor." I stepped down from the witness stand. My legs felt like lead. The short walk back to my seat felt like a mile. I could feel every eye in the room on me, a weight of judgment and pity. I sat down, my hands trembling in my lap. I felt stripped bare. I felt smaller, older, and more alone than I had ever felt in my entire life. I stepped down from the witness stand, feeling like I had already lost. The whole room seemed to fade into a blur. The silence that followed was worse than any of the accusations. If you have listened this far, please help me by commenting with the hope below, just so I know there are friends still walking with me on this journey. Your presence is the greatest encouragement for me to tell the final part of this story, the part where the truth finally found its voice. The truth. According to Marcus, Jasmine's lawyer sat down, a look of polished satisfaction on his face. He had done his job. He had painted a picture of me for the judge and jury. And in that picture, I was a bitter, controlling old woman, clinging to the past. I looked over at the jury box. A few of them wouldn't meet my eye. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. It was over. I had lost Mr. Davies. My lawyer, now, stood up slowly. He adjusted his tie. The room was quiet. So quiet, I could hear the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. "The plaintiff calls one final witness," he said, his voice clear and steady. "Mr. Marcus Pierce." The name landed in the silent room like a stone dropped into a still pond. A ripple of surprise went through the observers. I saw Jasmine flinch. A tiny, almost imperceptible movement. My own heart gave a painful lurch. Marcus, what was this I hadn't known? Mr. Davies hadn't told me, and then I saw him. My son. He rose from the back of the courtroom where he had been sitting, hidden in the shadows. He walked toward the front, his steps measured and heavy. He didn't look like the confident architect I knew. He looked burdened. He looked like a man carrying the weight of the world on his shoulders. He didn't look at me. He couldn't. And he didn't look at his wife. He just kept his eyes fixed on the empty witness box. As if it were a life raft in a stormy sea, he took the oath, his voice low and raspy. He sat down. The silence in the room was absolute now. It was a holding of breath. "Mr. Davies began simply, Mr. Pierce. Do you recall the day your mother gave you and your wife a cashier's check for $300,000? Yes. I do," Marcus said, his voice barely a whisper. "And what was your understanding of what that money was for?" It was a gift to help us, but it was also understood that it was still her money, her security. We were to pay it back when we could. A sharp intake of breath came from Jasmine's side of the room. Her lawyer was already on his feet, shouting, "Objection," but the judge just waved him down. "Mr. Davies continued, "Mr. Pierce, were you present on the afternoon of May the 17th of last year, when your wife, Ms. Sutton, had a conversation with your mother?" Marcus swallowed hard. His eyes finally lifted. For a fraction of a second, they met mine. In them, I saw an ocean of pain. "Yes," he said. "I was there. And can you tell the court what your wife said to your mother on that day?" He closed his eyes. She told her that without her money, she was worthless. The word, spoken in my son's broken voice, was 100 times more painful than when his wife had spat it out. Jasmine's lawyer was on his feet again, yelling. But Marcus wasn't finished. He looked at the judge. "Your Honor," he said, his voice gaining a sliver of strength. "May I present something to the court?" He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small, digital audio recorder. Jasmine went pale, utterly, deathly pale. "For the last 2 years," Marcus said, his voice trembling but clear. I have been living in a difficult situation. I knew what my wife was capable of. I saw how she treated my mother, but I also knew that any direct confrontation would be denied. She is an expert at public relations, Your Honor, at managing perception, so I began to document things. For my mother's protection, he pressed a button on the recorder, and then Jasmine's voice filled the courtroom, not her sweet, public voice, but a hard, ugly voice, full of venomous laughter. It was a recording of a phone call, I swear. Tracy, the old woman is driving me crazy, her recorded voice said, tinny and clear in the silent room. But the mission is almost complete. Marcus is completely on my side now. I've convinced him his mom is toxic and controlling. My breath caught in my throat. The recording continued. The best part, he thinks the house is our future. He has no idea that once we refinance and my name is on the mortgage outright, I'm taking him for half in the divorce. Old Vivian worked her whole life for this estate. And now, it's going to be mine. The laughter on the tape echoed in the dead silence. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated greed. When Marcus turned off the recorder, you could have heard a pin drop. He finally looked at me, his eyes brimming with unshed tears. I had to let you think I had abandoned you. Mom, he whispered. His words, a confession meant only for me, but heard by the whole room. It was the only way she would ever trust me enough to show her true self. I had to let her believe she had won. I am so sorry. I am so sorry for the pain it caused you. And in that moment, everything became clear. The dropped calls, the strange texts, the averted eyes. It wasn't weakness. It wasn't betrayal. It was a strategy. A painful, desperate strategy of a son trapped in a terrible position, trying to protect his mother in the only way he knew how. He hadn't been silent out of cowardice. He had been silent to gather the truth, and that truth, now laid bare in the cold light of the courtroom, was more powerful than any lie. I looked at my son, my strong, good son, and for the first time in over a year, I didn't feel worthless. I didn't feel alone. I felt seen. Ashes and embers. After the verdict, after the lawyers had shaken hands and the judge had left the bench, Marcus walked over to me. He didn't say a word in the echoing quiet of the courtroom. He just stood there, his shoulders slumped, looking like a little boy again. Let's go home. Marcus, I said, and for the first time in a very long time, he simply nodded and followed me. We sat in my small, quiet living room, the same room where he'd taken his first steps. I made us some tea, my hand still trembling slightly. We sat in silence for a long while. The only sound, the ticking of the old mantel clock. Finally, he spoke. His voice was thick with a shame so deep it was hard to listen to. I'm sorry, Mom. It was just 3 words, but they carried the weight of years. I was a coward, he went on, staring into his teacup. I knew what she was. I saw how she treated you, but I was trapped. I thought if I just kept things calm, if I didn't make waves, I could fix it somehow. I was wrong. I was so wrong. He finally looked at me, and his eyes were full of tears. I let her hurt you, and I stood by and did nothing. Can you ever forgive me? I looked at my son, my foolish, complicated, broken son, the anger I had held onto for so long, that hard, smoldering coal in my heart, seemed to just dissolve. It didn't vanish in a blaze of glory. It just faded into a soft, gray ash. Oh, Marcus, I said, my own voice breaking. You are my child. Forgiveness was never the question. I reached out and took his hand. It was cold, but the trusting, that will take time. We have to earn that back from each other. He nodded, squeezing my hand. I'll spend the rest of my life trying. Mom, I promise. In that moment, I felt a fragile peace settle over me. The war was over. The cost had been immense, but we had survived. We could rebuild. The thought was a small, warm ember in the cold ashes of the past few years. And then the doorbell rang. We both froze. Marcus stood up and went to the door. It was Jasmine. She wasn't crying. She wasn't screaming. She stood on my doorstep looking as cool and polished as ever, though there were dark circles under her eyes. She ignored Marcus completely and looked straight at me. Her face was a blank mask. "I'm not here to apologize," she said, her voice flat and empty of all emotion. "I'm not here to beg. I just thought you should know the full consequences of what you've done." She stepped into the room, uninvited. She walked over to the coffee table and placed a small, folded piece of paper upon it. It was a photograph, an ultrasound. She looked at me, a flicker of something cold and triumphant in her eyes. "You won, Vivian," she said. "You can have the house. You can have the money. But I wanted you to know," she let the words hang in the air. "A final, poisoned dart. You also just took the roof from over the head of your grandchild, the one you never even knew existed." Silence. A silence so profound, so heavy. It felt like the world had stopped turning. My victory, my hard-won justice, my fragile peace, it all turned to dust in my mouth. I looked at the blurry, black and white image on the table, a baby, a life, a part of me, and a part of Marcus, and a part of her, a new branch on our shattered family tree. I could feel Jasmine watching me, waiting for me to crumble. I could feel Marcus beside me, frozen in shock and disbelief. This was her final move, her checkmate. She knew I would never make my own grandchild homeless. She thought she had me trapped, that my love for this unborn child would undo everything, that I would hand back my victory out of guilt. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. The tired, wounded mother disappeared. The grieving widow faded away. The woman who had just survived a war stood up. The head of this family, whether they knew it or not, made a decision. I looked at Jasmine. My voice, when it came, was not angry. It was not sad. It was calm, and it was final. "You will not be homeless," I said. Then I turned to my son, Marcus. "You will provide for your child. You will live in that house. You will be a father." I picked up the ultrasound picture and held it for a moment. Then I looked back at Jasmine, and she finally saw the woman she had been fighting against all along. Not a victim, but a survivor. "But let me be perfectly clear," I said, my voice as steady as stone. "The court's ruling stands. That house is mine. The money is mine. You will live there under my ownership. Not as a gift, not out of my weakness, but as a legal arrangement." I walked to my desk and picked up a pen. "Tomorrow, my lawyer will draft a rental agreement. You will pay rent. It will be a fair market price. And this," I said, tapping the legal victory papers, "this judgment will stand as a lien against that property. It will be a permanent, legal reminder of the debt that is owed, not just the financial debt, but the moral one. You will raise my grandchild in that house?" I finished, looking from Jasmine's shocked face to Marcus's stunned one. "And every day, you will be reminded that a family is built on respect and truth, not on lies, and not on silence." I had won the battle, but now, I had to lay down the terms of the peace, a peace built not on forgiveness, but on boundaries, hard, clear, and unbreakable boundaries, for the sake of the new life that was on its way. My garden. It has been 9 months now since the day the gavel fell. The seasons have turned. The chill of that courtroom has given way to the gentle warmth of a Georgia spring. I am sitting on my back porch, in my husband's old rocking chair. It makes a soft, rhythmic sound against the wooden planks. Creak and release, creak and release. It's a peaceful sound, a sound of survival. From here, I can see my garden. After everything was over, it was the first thing I turned to. My hands needed something to do, something to mend. The flower beds were overgrown with weeds, a reflection of the neglect my own heart had suffered. So, I started digging. My old knees protested, and my back ached at the end of the day. But I kept at it. I pulled out the bitter weeds, one by one, their roots clinging stubbornly to the soil. Much like old sorrows, I turned the earth over, letting it breathe. And then, I planted new things. Lavender, for peace. Rosemary, for remembrance. And along the back fence, a row of bright, defiant sunflowers. The divorce was quiet and quick. Jasmine took what was legally hers from the marriage and moved away. I heard she went back west somewhere. I do not wish her ill. I do not wish her anything at all. She has become a ghost in a story that is no longer mine to tell. The lien remains on the house on the hill, a silent, legal document filed away in a county office. It is not a weapon. It is a boundary. It is the fence I built around my own heart. Sometimes I sit out here and I think about all that has happened. I think about the lessons that life insists on teaching you, whether you're ready for them or not. I used to believe that a mother's love was supposed to be a blank check, an endless, unconditional giving of oneself. I learned that love, true love, must also have the wisdom to protect itself. Sometimes, the most loving thing a parent can do is to teach their child about consequences, not out of anger, but out of a deep and abiding hope that they will learn from them. You teach your children how to be strong by showing them your own strength. You protect them, sometimes, by protecting yourself first. I look at Marcus now, and I see a different man. The divorce aged him. It carved new lines into his face, but it also put a new kind of steel in his spine. He is no longer a boy, caught between a mother's love and a wife's ambition. He is a man who learned a hard lesson. He learned that loyalty isn't about blind silence. It's about having the courage to stand for what is right, even if it means tearing your own world apart to do it. The silence between us now is different. It's not the empty, aching silence of things left unsaid. It's a comfortable quiet, a shared peace. He comes over every Sunday, not out of obligation, but out of a simple desire to be here. Jasmine called me worthless. She measures a person's value in dollars and square footage, in the shine of a new car and the brand name on a handbag. That is the world she lives in. But an old librarian, I know that real value is quieter than that. It's in the stories we live and the lessons we pass down. It's in the dignity that no one can take from you unless you hand it to them. My legacy isn't the number in a bank account. It is here, in this rich soil between my fingers. It is in these hands that have worked and loved and held on. It is in the truth that, at 76 years old, I finally found the courage to speak out loud. There is a car pulling into the driveway. It's Marcus. He gets out. But he's not alone. He walks around to the passenger side and helps his new daughter, my granddaughter, out of her car seat. Her name is Grace. She is 3 months old, and she has my husband's eyes. Marcus carries her over to the porch. He hands the baby to me, her small, warm weight settling against my chest. She smells of milk and innocence. He looks at the two of us, then down at the newly tilled earth of my garden. It looks good. Mom, he says, his voice quiet. There's still work to do. I reply, rocking gently. The soil is good, but it needs time. He nods. He understands. He pulls up a small stool and sits beside my chair, not saying anything more. And we just sit there together, the three of us, a grandmother, a son, and a new beginning. We sit in a comfortable silence, listening to the birds sing and the gentle creak of the old wooden chair, rocking back and forth. Creak and release. Creak and release. The sound of a life not ending, but continuing. And that is where Vivian Reed's story comes to a close. A story of a battle won, and a peace that must now be carefully, cautiously built. I have to ask you, what do you think of Vivian's final decision to offer a roof but not forgiveness? To demand a boundary instead of surrender? If you were in her shoes, would you have done anything differently? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. I truly do read every single one. Your perspectives bring these stories to life in ways I could never imagine on my own. If this story made you think, or made you feel, please don't forget to leave a like. Share it with someone you believe it will touch. And be sure to subscribe to Deepu Cater Stories so you don't miss the next chapter we uncover together. I'll see you in the next story, and who knows, maybe next time, it will be your story we tell.